Thank you.
All right, welcome. It is August 8th, the ESIP Soil Ontology and Information Cluster, and I am delighted to welcome back Megan Wong to give us an update on the vocabulary supporting data harmonization for the Australian Soil Information System. Thank you so much, Megan. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So today I'm presenting on vocabularies that are supporting data harmonization, as Kathy said, through the Australian Soil Information System, that's ANSIS. Transition, hold on a minute. All right, so I'd like to start by welcoming, I'd like to begin to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're all meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I'm presenting from Jarrah country in central Victoria, southeastern Australia. So acknowledgements that this work is funded through the Australian Government National Soil Strategy, so Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry, Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, that's DAF. So, and special thanks to all the authors, the expert contributors and authorities of the legacy vocabularies I'm presenting on today. So without all their hard work and their shoulders that we stand on, this work wouldn't be possible. And to the whole team, particularly the lead, Dr. Simon Cox. So just a quick overview of ANSIS. So the ANSIS Soil Information System brings together soil data from across Australia, connecting multiple data sources to provide access to a nationally consistent soil data information. So I'm presenting on the project phase today, which was begun in November 2021 and went through to June 23. In collaboration with CSIRO and partner organisations from government, research organisations, industry, private sector and the community. Just the first phase of ANSIS included, went through right from the conceptualisation of ANSIS through to an operational federated data system. So this project phase included several streams of work. There was the project governance, including the technical and steering committees for the engagement and contribution of key stakeholders, establishing a common information model to which the provided data could be mapped. And part of this included making the supporting vocabularies available for data transfer and harmonisation, assisting that, so making them available in machine and human readable format to support the model, which is I'll be focusing on today. And also work developing a schema for the data delivery formats such as JSON, and that's in progress. That's happening at the moment as well. So then data is provided, their data via services. So it's a federated system. So their data included data that was collected in various ways and for various different purposes. And so that final phase was through that provision of the data services, there was then the mapping of the services and the harmonisation of the data to deliver the nationally consistent data through ANSIS. So now it can be searched and accessed through a data portal, ansis.net. And the work and the learnings of the first phase are now supporting the second, the ongoing and next phase of ANSIS, the data harmonisation through a federated approach. So today I'll be focusing on the representations of the work that we did on the Australian National Code lists, controlled vocabularies through to ontologies required to support the information model, and hence, in the harmonisation of data through ANSIS. So I'll just give you a bit of background on the model. So the context for where these vocabularies sit within ANSIS. So there was some basic principles that this model were based upon to define it. So in particular, it was a priority that the understanding consensus of soils of the Australian soil community were represented through the model, principally as encoded in the Australian Soil and Landscape Soil Field Handbook. So it was also important to recognise the model's context in relation to important and preceding work such as ANSIS, SoilML, GLOSIS and the previous exchange experiments and standards, which I won't go into depth. But yeah, so to develop the core ANSIS ontology and for the creation of the for the creation of the vocabularies to support it. So we use the web ontology language OWL, and for some of the simpler lists, simpler knowledge organization systems, and well, these are based on RDF, resource description framework. But as I mentioned, the model was substantially or needed to be substantially based on the Australian Soil and Land Survey Field Handbook. And I'll refer to that as the Yellow Book. So as well as the Yellow Book at the same time, I won't go into too much, but the ANSIS domain model borrows strongly and is based upon many existing global standards, including the update of the ONM formalised in SOSA, so Sensor Observation Sample and Actuator model of the SSN ontology, that's the semantic sensor network ontology. So this update clarifies the difference between sensors being observers and procedures, protocols and methods, and includes some more complete model for samples, which are result from acts of sampling, and also deals with a model for treatments, so that's actuations. So for those who are interested in taking a bit of a closer look at the model, I'll provide these, here are some links, and I'll provide these to Kath in the meeting documentation. And there's various diagrams and explanations of various components of the model, if you're interested in particular components there. But just as an overview, using the using the standard observation measurements approach to represent soil observation data, the ANSIS soil domain application is represented by a set of entity types or classes, and these reflect the practice of the Australian soil community. As I mentioned, largely the Yellow Book, but here they're represented in brown and light green, all these colours. So each individual entity of interest or feature of interest has a set of characteristic properties, that's observable properties, which are determined by an act of observation. So this includes a visit to a soil site where the act of sampling is carried out to generate a sample. So that is a specified protocol or procedure implemented by a sampler. There's a personal device at a particular time and location. And on this sample, methods, specific protocols or procedural methods are carried out by an observer or a sensor at a particular time, or for example, a chemical test carried out back in the laboratory. So the result of this observation is an estimate of the value of the observed property, and it's encoded as a quantity or a category. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the entity types and how they're all related and their properties and the values that are encoded. So the results are based quite largely upon the Yellow Book. That's the current published version of the Australian Soil Lands Survey Field Handbook. So I won't focus anymore on the full domain model, but just to narrow it down a bit on some of the controlled vocabs that the soil domain, the ANSIS domain model leverages. And we worked on a lot through this project phase. So that's the control vocabs for what Australian soil practitioners observe, so the observable properties, and how they are measured, the procedures, and how then the results are coded. So in Australia, the soil community has these bodies of knowledge are encoded in what you call coloured books. So laboratories use these, they're used widely across Australia. States and territories use them in their state databases. A lot of historical data is encoded using these books, these coloured books. So they include soil chemistry and physical handbooks, which are predominantly just they are lists of very comprehensive lists of methods, through to the Australian classification scheme that has a more complex encoding of the relationship between terms for classifying soil. And this is viewed as an ontology in itself. Historically, these have been available as printed books, web pages, and more recently, proprietary ebooks. So I'll just go through how we turned these books in their various formats into vocabularies for the web. So just skipping through, we did strive and continue to strive to follow best practices for creating vocabularies on the web. And a nice little paper, if you haven't seen it, is 10 Simple Rules for Making a Vocabulary Fair. I found that a nice kind of entry level paper and read. So here's an example of how we followed the 10 simple rules for making the books fair using the Green Book. So we worked through each book, and we're continuing to work through steps in creating these vocabularies for the web. So for example here, the first thing we did was you make sure you have an agreement from the publisher through to be able to do this, through to encoding the vocab, the list of methods in SCOS, and publishing it through a vocabulary service so it's discoverable and has persistent URIs assigned, through to acknowledging that it needs a maintenance. The vocabulary needs a maintenance process to be put in place for future additions, revisions, deletions, etc. And that work is part of the next phase. So now for each of the coloured books, each term or concept has a persistent web identifier, which returns information in a machine and human readable form. And each term includes notations, definitions, and links to other concepts within the vocabulary, within the book itself, or across other vocabularies, so across that are reused across the books, say. And in all cases, we stayed as true to the source content as possible. We did not go making things up. So now all the vocabularies are discovered by through Research Vocabularies Australia, through searching soil science in the subject field. And so anyone can download the vocabularies as a whole, individual terms or concepts, and, or access them through API. The web identifiers could be used for anything as simple as labeling data columns on Excel sheets through to using in web applications, user interfaces. And importantly, they're being used to help with data harmonization, search and discovery, and data reuse through ANSIS. For example, they're being used at the moment within the ANSIS JSON schema implementation of the information. They're within the information model, or the information model refers to them. So, and I should mention that these vocabularies were introduced in this form at Soil Science Australia last month in Darwin, so they really socialised with the soil community to let them know this is available for these vocabularies are available for their reuse and contribution feedback on, so that's as well as through the immediate use case of ANSIS. So having a bit of a look inside. So you search soil science and research vocabs Australia, and here you'll find the chemical methods. So each method is organised by the collection or chapter, so organised in the chapter in which you find them within the book, so as individual collections. So you might not be able to see it too clearly, but that's the orange there. And each method has a persistent identifier that you can use to label data with. And associated with each procedure, so with each concept, is further content such as method code, the method codes and descriptions that stay true to the book. So we made both versions. There's two versions of the Green Book available, and we made them both available as vocabularies for the web. So we show methods that are deprecated over time and the relationships between the codes across versions, such as splits in the methods between the versions. And the codes do remain, so the PID the identifier did remain the same between versions, and that is reflecting the that's the good thinking of the authors of these books. So the methods themselves don't fundamentally change across versions where the codes are the same. So you won't go getting different results if you carry out those procedures from each version. So the soil physical methods is organised much the same as the soil chemical methods. So this is the brown book, and they're organised into collections per chapter. And then we have the Australian Soil and Land Survey Field Handbook, which is organised in different collections. So that's again per chapter. But they're actually, I should say, not different. Well, yes, collections. They're organised as different vocabularies themselves. So this is recognising that the chapters have different authorship. So potentially different. They potentially may require different governance. So at the moment, they are organised into different vocabularies. So have a look inside one of these vocabularies. Here's the soil profile collection, and within that you'll find soil classifiers. So they are the codes of how results are encoded when describing the soil profile. So, and within that, then they're organised into sub-collections, and they're according to the property that they are used to describe. So, and in some places you'll also find cross-references where the same concepts are used in different places across different chapters. Yeah, and the ordering of the chapters reflect the book. So we try and have it reflect the book or what people are used to, as much as we can. And within the Australian RVA, you'll also find the Australian soil classification scheme encoded. So this writing is small, but here's an example of the intertidal hydrosol concept. So you'll see the URI, IRI permanently denotes the concept. It's got the notation, the enumeration of the suborders, and description of the valid grade groups, subgroups, and families of the suborder. So this was a real lot of work, and I am not the expert on this vocabulary. Simon did a really great mammoth effort on this vocabulary or ontology. Yeah, so work's underway on the observed properties of the books. So I'll just touch on them briefly. So for the ASLS, so that's the yellow book, the observed properties have been built. They're actually in the ANSIS information model, and they're sitting as a vocabulary within, and you can discover them. Actually, I think they're in demo mode, discoverable through Research Vocabularies Australia. So within the information model, these are related to the value spaces. So, the results that can be encoded, or the results that are a result of an observation of these properties, which I introduced before. So those yellow book codes, so they're related to each other within the model. But as I mentioned, I think they are in demo mode. I'm not sure you'll be able to find them, but they are, you will find them within the model. And so for the green and brown book, the lists of methods, we've started to extract the observable properties also. You can see two lists of properties, small writing, but observed physical properties and observable chemical properties that the methods in these books are a measure of. So how we started about this was the observable properties are kind of intertwined within these books, not not specified as particular concepts, say. So we began breaking out the components of what we read to be the observable properties. We actually used, as a bit of a guide there, the BODC parameter usage vocabularies and its semantic models, the parameter usage vocabulary ontology. And so we didn't fully implement this, but it helped us to conceptualize and think about what the observable property might be that we want to encode for reuse through ANSIS. So we did end up taking a subset of what we pulled out, and that was really, and to come up with these lists of observable properties, and that was really what was acceptable to the community and users, soil practitioners and database folk, soil data managers are used to seeing. There were things like just basically like concentration of, and then the chemical entity, or kind of compound observed properties such as, what's one, anion exchange capacity or something like that, a bit more complex. So they're being, those observed properties, the vocabs haven't been created themselves, but they're being tested at the moment within the JSON schema, and the first phase of we're implementing the first phase of ANSIS, so data harmonization. So the intent's that these properties will be turned into web vocabularies through time, into the next phase. But how this works in draft for review by the expert authorities, those that are in charge of the, for example, the soil chemical methods, those that the body that will be taking on responsibility, hopefully, for the maintenance of these observable property codes. So that's about it there, and a little bit on governance into the future. Maintenance and governance concerns of the vocabularies. So in the early phase of this work, we outlined a number of governance considerations for the community and stakeholders of the vocabularies to consider. So these vocabs will remain relevant, trusted and persistent, and this will require good governance and for the community needs and expectations to be met within the vocabularies. So in particular, roles were important. We've flagged that roles are important. And so there's a number of roles that are required for the governance of these vocabularies, or that indeed already are filled, most likely, for the governance of these vocabularies. So we do need to respect the existing historical roles of individuals and groups that manage the books. And we've identified a number of kind of key roles that we see need to be articulated, firmed up as soon as possible in the next phase of ANSIS. So we have flagged with the community some notes on change requests, some things for them to think about, and we'll do this also into the next phase for submitting change requests and publishing or pushing changes, and how those changes are published, which format of the vocabularies. So the availability of these on the web doesn't mean that the other formats need to be replaced necessarily, particularly, the book. People still find having a book handy out in the field. That's the way they prefer to work. However, we are saying that, the benefits of these vocabularies, aside from their use, transferring data across the web, is that change requests can be implemented in a more real time, so that we don't necessarily have to wait years, like 10 years between release of books for a small change or addition to be made. But different types of changes will require different revision schedules, and they should respect existing community norms and policies that are already existing for the governance of these books. Oh, there you go. That's about it from me, from us. And yeah, any clarifying questions?
Thank you. That was really impressive. I'm curious, how many man hours went into transferring the colored books into these resources? Do you have a ballpark?
Jay, that's really hard to say. Oh, the brown book, say, the brown book didn't particularly take that long. That was, I wouldn't have even been a couple of weeks, dare I say. Or not even, I don't know. But because we had the pattern set up from the green book, we went, yes, right, that's pretty much the same as the green book. So we could use the workflow of the green book. We had, what was it called? SCOS Play. And we reused that template that we used for the green book for the brown book. We knew the questions to ask, I guess, of the publisher in terms of content. And I just had a much clearer idea, I guess, in my head of what's what conceptually. Whereas when you're learning the green book, like I was playing around with that, how would you encode this pre-ANSIS? And, we stuffed around a lot. Hours. I wouldn't even like to guess. And the on the taxonomy, the classification, I really can't say. I think it took Simon a long time, but not as long as, I think it might depend who you are as well. He got in the mode and pumped it out. I don't even like to say how long he spent. Man hours, 2 weeks.
All right.
Maybe.
All right.
Maybe.
All right.
That's
nice.
Maybe it depends. Yeah, it depends.
Very cool. All right. Does anyone have other clarifying questions? All right. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording then.
One question from my side is the software behind it. Is that maybe open source? Because I mean, it looks like a nice way of providing such semantic vocabularies. And it's one of the sanest ones I've seen. Everything else doesn't let me really open up the details while leaving the context. A lot of the systems I've seen always then jump to the next page and I get dizzy.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean in terms of the RVA, the presentation?
Wait, let me find it again. I've been playing with which winded the various ASLS vocabularies. I started getting lost in the profile classifiers. Let me put the link into the chat.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a nice way of providing these vocabularies. That's why my question was, what is the software behind this? The way I know Australian projects like this will be something open source, is my hope.
Yeah. No, sorry, it slips my mind of the what is behind RVA. That would be what's behind it would be open source. There's a number of different stacks to present vocabularies, isn't there? And it slips my mind what RVA uses. I'd say drop RVA or Simon would be the one there to answer
I will
that.
bother
Sorry.
Simon on that.
Yeah, but there are a number of different stacks that have got their advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of making this just, I mean, we can store it within any stack and make it presentable through RVA via Sparkle query. So we don't necessarily have to store it in and upload the vocabulary within RVA itself. But the benefit is having it discoverable through Research Vocabularies Australia is that that's where Australians tend to go. So there's other, I don't know if you saw, you'll see some turn vocabularies are in there, soil related vocabularies. I'm on another project as visualizing Australasia's soil, so a soil CRC project. They've got their codes up in there. So it's a nice way for Australians to search and find vocabularies, but that doesn't mean they aren't discoverable through other places.
Yeah, I will trace Simon on all of these various systems. I mean, I need smoke less. Sorry.
You're all right.
No,
Yeah,
but
there's pros and cons of different ones. I know we're in
the one we have
some early conversations.
The one we have in Europe for Inspire is dying badly, and we need some replacement for it. I mean, either the contractors finally perform a miracle, but whoa.
All right.
Yeah,
on that note, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so we can have some open time. Yeah. So thank you so much.